Original broadcast on Minamata disease.
Hi, this is Francisco Price from a Price News Network speaking to you on November 9, 1956. I have received some breaking news. There are reports of a health disaster taking place in the city of Minamata, Japan. It has been reported that the symptoms of this disease include ataxia, numbness, vision loss, and weakness throughout the body. 5 deaths have been reported since the disease was first detected a few days ago. Animal life in the Minamata Bay region has also been affected. Fish and shellfish, which are a main part of the local population's daily diet, have been seen dead by the dozens on the coast surrounding the city. It is believed that they too have also been affected by this disease, which is now being called Minamata disease. While there is no information about how the disease started or where it comes from, there is a factory close by that is notorious for dropping all its wastes into the bay without treating them in any way whatsoever. This company manufactures chemical products that are mainly produced out of materials such as mercury, which is believed to provoke poisoning in people with similar symptoms from Minamata's disease symptoms. Ataxia, numbness in the hands and feet, generalized muscle weakness, loss of peripheral vision, and damage to hearing and speech are some of the signs and symptoms. In severe cases, coma, death, paralysis, and insanity all occur within a few weeks of the commencement of symptoms. While much is still unknown about this disease, many people are already suffering from it. Our solutions are starting to be brainstormed. Thank you. We'll be right back after an update.
5 years since original broadcast of Minamata disease.
Hi, this is Francisco Price from a Price News Network speaking to you on November 9, 1961. It has been 5 years today since the Minamata disease was initially reported on a Price News Network. To help you understand more about this disease, I am delighted to present to you an expert on the disease, Lenny Santos.
Hi, Francisco. Thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Thank you, Lenny. It is my pleasure. Now, I wanted to ask you some questions about Minamata disease. So let's start with the basics. What was the cause of this disaster?
The Minamata disease was caused by the chemical factories owned by Chiso Corporation, which dumped wastewater filled with toxic compound methylmercury into Minamata Bay and Shiranui Sea. This poisoned the shellfish and fish that were living in the water. As a result, the local communities residing in Minamata and Kumamoto Prefecture consumed fish and shellfish on a regular basis that contained high amounts of mercury. And due to the chemicals being dumped into the water, these communities relied heavily on Minamata Bay and Shiranui for their food.
Terrible. What was the economic cost of the disaster?
Ever since the discovery of Minamata disease, several major industrial activities in Minamata City have been depressed. Some of these industries, including fishing, commercial sales, and industrial production, have been substantially less successful when compared to the rest of the prefecture. On the other hand, the industry of agriculture in the area has been left largely unaffected by the Minamata disease due to its major agricultural sites being far away from the areas affected by Minamata disease.
Was Minamata disease preventable?
Minamata disease was a disaster that was entirely preventable since it was caused by a factory that dumped this waste into Minamata Bay and Shiranui Sea instead of properly disposing of it. When Minamata disease was starting to appear, the communities in the area should have been provided with clean water and food sources that were not connected to Minamata Bay. It was common knowledge that the factories had been dumping mercury-laden waste into the bay. Mercury is an extremely toxic chemical to life and should not be released into the environment. And when Minamata disease cases started increasing, government officials should have made the connection to the mercury poisoning and reacted appropriately. This would have potentially prevented many people from becoming sick. In addition, the lack of regulation of the chemical waste from the factories led to the death of many people, which destroyed entire communities.
Terrible. What was done to make Minamata disease worse?
The continued dumping of wastewater into Minamata Bay and the Shiranui Sea came from 1932 to 1961, and it dumped an estimated 24 tons of mercury into Minamata Bay, which as time went on further contaminated the fish and shellfish in the bay with mercury. This went on to build up in the organisms in the bay until eventually it was eaten by the people in the area and caused the Minamata disease to occur. Also, the fact that Minamata disease remained a mystery for a good amount of time after discovery caused prevention of the disease to be delayed since not enough information was present to be able to prevent it.
Terrible. Well, why is Minamata disease so deadly to the people and the environment it affects?
Well, when mercury entered Minamata Bay, it persisted in the sediment until eventually the microscopic organisms that were inside of the water and soil converted the inorganic mercury that was in the water into a toxic chemical called methylmercury. When methylmercury is exposed to humans and animals, it causes the microtubules to break down.
Could you please explain what a microtubule is?
A microtubule is a hollow tube-like structure found in the cytoplasm that is extremely important since they provide structural support to cells and play an important role in cell production and is responsible for the stabilization and extension of axons. This makes it where once these microtubules break down, the protective layer of the neurons breaks down and begin to clump together, which stops them from functioning, and eventually the nervous system of the person or the animal starts to break down.
Since the mercury was in the bay, were plants also affected?
Methyl mercury is also extremely toxic to plants, since it suppresses plants' growth and causes oxidative stress by creating RAWs and disturbing the electron transport chain. A plant that is exposed to methyl mercury will quickly cease to function, be unable to reproduce, and eventually die. So if methyl mercury is present in an environment in excess, the animals along with the plants will quickly start to be affected, and if exposed for long enough will eventually cease to reproduce and start to die.
An absolute tragedy. Alright, Lenny, thank you so much for being here. We'll be right back after an update.
Thank you, Francisco.
25 years since the original broadcast on Minamata disease.
Hi, this is Francisco Price from our Price News Network, speaking to you on November 9, 1981. Today is the 25-year anniversary of the first time that the Minamata disease was initially reported on a Price News Network. As an act of remembrance and awareness, I'm delighted to present to you Expert Jack Eden, who will talk to us about the long-term effects of this disease.
Hi Francisco, thank you so much for inviting me here.
It is my pleasure, Jack. Now, I want to ask you some questions about Minamata disease. So let's start. Sorry. So let's start with the basics. What were the short-term and long-term effects of this disease?
So Francisco, there are many neurological signs and symptoms of Minamata disease. Some of these include axia, which caused by sensory disturbance might impair a person's ability to move voluntarily. Also a collection of speech impairments called dysphagia, which are caused by muscle weakness, tunnel vision, and it should be known that findings from Minamata revealed symptoms frequently appeared suddenly. People who had trouble swallowing, hearing, or seeing deteriorated more swiftly, going through convulsions before falling into a coma and dying. The severity of the symptoms varied according to the level of mercury exposure. Lower levels of methyl mercury led to lesser symptoms, but more severe instances had irreversible sequelae. The mortality rate of Minamata sickness is obscure. 2,282 cases have received formal acknowledgement as of this year. However, it is possible that many more cases went unreported. Also, the mercury from the factories that got dumped into the bay built up the environment in which to cause fish and shellfish to begin to die. Plants were also dying due to high amounts of mercury, which devastated the local ecosystems of Minamata Bay. Even though the Japanese government has tried to clean out Minamata Bay, high amounts of contamination are still found in its sediment. Here, the local communities were also fishing based, and since the water continues to be toxic, they had to stop fishing, which was a major economic field in the area along with tourism, due to around 4,000 Cisco jobs were lost in their area, which led to a major unemployment problem as the major industries in the area closed, which led to economic collapse of the area.
It is such a shame that this disaster was so badly handled. Has something similar happened again?
Yes, Francisco, the second outbreak of Minamata sickness occurred in Nagata Prefecture in Japan, which had the same symptoms as the first outbreak in Kumamoto Prefecture. The outbreak was recognized in 1965 under the same name. In the second instance, the Showa Electronical Company's chemical faculty in Kanso village produced acetaldehyde using a mercury sulfate catalyst, which led to the discharge of methyl mercury, which was the cause of the disease acute mercury poisoning. Untreated releases of this highly toxic substance into the Gano River allowed it to bioaccumulate up to the food chain and contaminate the fish. When locals ate the contaminated fish, they re-experienced symptoms like axia, generalized muscle weakness, a narrowing field of vision, hearing loss, and speech impairment, just like the people affected by the first wave of Minamata disease suffered. The patients from the Gano River watershed totaled 690 persons.
What do we as a society learn from this?
This signaled a turning point in Japan's understanding of crucial significance of anti-pollution measures, inspiring the creation of new regulations and technological advancements for environmental protection. However, in the case of Minamata disease, the initial delay in implementing the necessary precautions caused the damage to spread even further. While the government continues to put in place extensive measures to deal with pollution's effects, the firms found accountable continue to pay out enormous sums in compensation. The whole thing served as a painful lesson for the government. In years that followed, Japan steadily enacted tougher environmental protection regulations, including the widespread legislation and amendment of the 14 statutes during the so-called pollution diet session in 1970. There are numerous programs, strategies, and tactics being used right now to stop environmental deterioration and health harm with the support of local and federal governments, businesses, and citizen organizations. Based on its own historical experiences, and lessons learned, Japan has actively participated in an international cooperation to help minimize environmental damage in other nations.
Thank you so much. Now that so much time has gone by, have steps been taken so that it doesn't happen again?
Yes, there have been steps taken. In 1970, the Water Pollution Control Law was enacted, which enforced control of discharge of pollution in all water areas in relation to toxic substances, for example, mercury and cadmium. Also, the Minamata municipal government has discussed issuing a declaration for the creation of a model environment city, as in putting various environmental initiatives into practice, making the best use of its experiences and lessons learned to turn the terminal legacy of environmental pollution into a positive asset. The Minamata disease was an unprecedented disaster brought on by pollution. Environmental conscious community development initiatives, including promoting reuse, recycling, and waste reduction through our comprehensive household waste collection program, where citizens have been required to sort their own waste into 20 different categories, has been discussed.
Okay, Jack. Thank you so much for being here and helping us shed a light over this painful subject. We'll be right back after an ad break.